Welcome to ClinArk Talks, where we have discussions about community health and clinical trials. This interview is sponsored by Forma Therapeutics. Forma is a clinical stage biopharmaceutical company focused on transforming the lives of patients with rare diseases such as sickle cell disease. Forma is currently seeking sickle cell warriors to participate in the Hibiscus Study, a clinical research study of an investigational medication. If you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to visit hibiscusresearchstudy.com. Today, we are pleased to welcome Irena Webster, the head of clinical development operations at Forma Therapeutics, to talk to us about clinical research and her experience and journey. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Irena, I'm super excited to have you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, your journey, just your background.
I'm really excited to be talking to you about this today. Obviously, something that's near and dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. So about me, I am a first-generation American. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s and 90s. So I think that probably tells you a lot about who I am, or at least the music I listen to. Brooklyn people are pretty specific. Our house was always full of people. Being immigrants, our house was always full of either family sponsoring to come over or friends who became closer than family. You tend to build these networks when you immigrate somewhere. Pretty much all the kids from the neighborhood came through. One of the things that sort of stands out in my mind, I often hear people talk about when they were growing up, they were broke, but they didn't know it. We knew.
I definitely can relate to that. Sometimes when you're in it, at least for me, I didn't know. Right. I didn't know. I was in it. I didn't know what was going on. For me, I found out about clinical research by accident. I needed a job. I was working at a doggy daycare. I'm sitting there like, I can't do this anymore. And I got on Indeed and just started hitting submit and was praying like, please, someone send me a job. And luckily, clinical research called. But how did you get your start in the clinical research industry? Also, pretty much by accident. Mm-hmm.
I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer. And when I was an undergraduate, I did a couple of internships at the DA's office in Brooklyn in the narcotics division. And then I sort of realized that maybe I want IP law, maybe intellectual property is something that's a little bit better for me. So, fast forward a few years, I met someone who was working in biotech. I came in as a contractor in the legal department, and I was the liaison to clinical. So I was helping negotiate site contracts, vendor contracts, that sort of thing. And I quickly realized that I wanted to know more about the clinical research side of things. Those always seemed really stressed out, but it seemed like something was really happening over there, and I just kind of wanted in. And so I started to learn a little bit about, what they were doing. And ultimately, I never went to law school. I ended up going to New York Medical College and getting my master's in public health instead.
Nice. So what do you do in your current role at Forma?
My current role is interesting. I consider my role to be sort of a bridge between patients and clinical trials. So clinical trials have to happen in order for us to be able to test drugs that could relieve any burden of a given disease. Mm-hmm. My job to make it as easy as possible for patients to participate. So, internally we work with physicians and scientists. We figure out what are our goals, what is the type of data that we're trying to collect. And then we work with physicians in the field to figure out how to operationalize it and really make these studies happen out in the field. And so, it's a really fun gig. I get to talk to a lot of different people and learn about a lot of different things. And I feel really lucky that I work for an organization like Forma, where we spend a lot of our time focused on the participant's experience. A lot of companies talk about being patient-centric, and we really are at Forma. We're really very patient-centric, and we value the time of our participants. So a big part of my job is to make sure that as participants are coming into our studies, we're relieving any burden for them as well as their caregivers. And we make sure we give them the support they need. So, if they need transportation or something like that, we make sure that that's taken care of. So it's as easy as possible for them to come into our studies.
Some people that, may be watching this, they may not be familiar with clinical research, clinical trials. For those people, can you just kind of give us the behind the scenes, kind of explain to us what a clinical trial is?
it's the way that we understand or the way that we learn about any potential new treatment options and how they impact a disease or a condition, right? So there's many different kinds of studies or trials. Sometimes you hear those words used interchangeably. There's retrospective, observational, interventional. Each one of these serves a different purpose, but the bottom line is the same. We're trying to make life better. At Forma, we're currently running the Hibiscus Study, which is something that we were talking about. And that's for people with sickle cell disease. And this is an interventional study, which means that we are testing a study medication to see if it helps improve anemia and decrease the number of annual pain crises people experience while they're on the study medication as compared to a placebo.
Why is it important for minorities to participate in clinical trials? I know it's a big discussion around, it's a big topic right now, but I would, love to hear your perspective.
So, I think it's important for everyone to participate in a clinical trial. I think that, there's no way that we can figure out if a drug or a method or a treatment works in a general population if everyone doesn't participate. And, I think for minorities in particular, they're so underrepresented in so many different aspects of the medical community. This is really a window or a door into right. Something else. And so, I often hear from people, who have participated in research that that's the first time that they were really exposed to the top teams, the top medical teams, and they got treatment they wouldn't have otherwise received. I know it was true within my own family. When my mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, she got the best of the best in New England, and that's because she participated in clinical trials, right? And so that impacted her life, and that was a good experience for us. I also hear a lot of times, some of my colleagues even say to me, I found out about working in clinical research or in STEM after either having participated or having a family member who had participated. So I just think it just broadens, everyone's opportunities and understanding of kind of the medical side of things and medical development if they can participate in research.
Now, I have to ask you, what are some of the guidelines or the rules in place to protect people that participate in clinical trials? I know just from our interactions with people out in the community, a lot of people, it helps to hear that there are things in place, to protect folks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's been put in place globally and within the U.S. There's regulations that protect patient safety, they protect patient privacy, and it's a top priority for all of our studies. So every study starts with safety. Effectiveness is always something we look at afterwards. I'll follow what's known as good clinical practices, or GCPs, we often refer to them. And these are guidances that specifically outline how we're supposed to interact with patients and their data, right? Collecting and treating their data. So we are both safeguarding their safety as they participate, but also their privacy, which is a big deal in terms of ownership of that data. All of the studies that get approved are monitored by the FDA and also by something called an independent review board. So sites who participate need approval through these independent review boards before they can participate in the studies. And then there's other governing bodies outside of the US that have similar responsibilities. And, when someone participates in the study, the very first thing that we do is we make sure that someone sits down with this person and goes over what are your rights as you participate in the study, and then walks you through all of the anticipated visits and procedures, as well as anything that we've learned about the drug so far. So there's going to be preclinical studies, earlier clinical studies. So anything we know about the safety will be shared with you at that point. Once that's done, you're asked to sign a document confirming that this occurred and that you feel like you're fully informed and that you're consenting to continue in the study. The document is literally called informed consent.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes.
So after I sign this document, am I allowed to, leave a clinical trial?
Absolutely. The thing that you should know is the informed consent is not a contract. It is our way of documenting that you received all of the appropriate information so that you could consent to continue in the study. But at a given point, you can back out of a procedure, you can back out of a visit, you can back out of the entire study. All you have to do is say, I don't want to participate in this portion, or I don't want to participate in this study anymore. there's no obligation on your side, and you don't have to give a reason. No is a complete answer as far as we're concerned, right? I mean, we want you to have that flexibility and know that you have that flexibility. Obviously, we don't want gaps in the data, right? We collect as much robust data as possible to be able to prove whether or not the drug is safe and effective. And many of the visits that are part of the clinical studies are really there for your safety. So the labs and procedures are really there to make sure that you're still participating in a safe way. But if you're comfortable with any of it, you just say no, and that's it, we're done.
Would you be able to kind of share, what are the phases of clinical trials and what phase is the Hibiscus study in?
So typically any given clinical program consists of about 3 or 4 phases. The first phase is really where we're normally looking at healthy volunteers and making sure that we're getting to the right dose based on safety and tolerability, and that everything is safe to continue. And then after that, we'll typically move on to a small number of patients at a small number of sites to do some similar testing to make sure that, the drug is well tolerated and safe before we continue on. In terms of phase 1, there's also a whole package of phase 1 studies that have to happen as part of your submission, which includes everything from us being able to understand how you metabolize and excrete the drug to, drug-drug interactions. Oftentimes in diseases, people have other medications that they have to take. We want to make sure it's safe for them to continue on their medication and see how these medications interact with one another, not just from a safety perspective, but again, back to how you metabolize and how you process, making sure that the drug continues to work in that phase. And then also checking on the key body systems, right? Seeing the impact on your kidneys and making sure that we understand end to end that this is a safe drug. So that all happens sort of in the phase 1 realm, and some of those studies are happening in parallel to phase 2 and 3. 2 is, again, the smaller piece where we have a couple of patients at a few sites, and we're really just trying to understand still safety. But that's where you start to see signals of efficacy or effectiveness of the drug. And then when you go into phase 3, you're really looking at much broader trials, typically with a global reach. And that's where you're reinforcing some of what you learned in terms of effectiveness in phase 2 on a much broader scale with a larger sample size of the patient population, right? And so you're really trying to prove your hypothesis there. But even there, our primary focus is always safety, and effectiveness comes after that. And then there's often, you'll do potentially phase 4 studies or post-market studies, we sometimes call them. Sometimes they're a commitment to the FDA. When you get an approval, they still want you to follow up for safety. And sometimes you're looking to see how your drug might be applied in other diseases or used in other ways. You might want to understand prescribing practices, hospitalization, health economic data and impact. So you might do all of that post-market or in phase 4. In regards to the Hibiscus study, we are currently in a phase 2-3 study. So the phase 2 portion is running this year. We have 2 doses that we're exploring versus placebo. And at the end of the year, we'll analyze that portion, select the best dose, and carry that forward into phase 3. There's also a safety extension, which all the patients are eligible to participate in, where they'll get a year of the study drug with no placebo, and we'll continue to monitor safety, but that's intended to continue that access to the study drug. Phase 3 will be 1 dose versus placebo, and that's where we're going to try to get all of our final data around the effectiveness of the drug and hopefully get an approval.
I know many people with sickle cell, they are hesitant to go to the doctor due to, of course, this pandemic and, COVID-19. What is Forma doing to, what is Forma and the sites doing to protect the study participants while they're attending these visits for your trial?
So there's a number of things that we've laid out because we're very concerned about our patient safety in a different respects, and we understand that this is an immunocompromised population, and we have to make sure that we're keeping them safe. So, we've put in actually a concierge service, which helps us facilitate different things depending on what the patient needs or what they're comfortable with. So we can provide, clean and safe transportation. We can courier the drug to your home. You can have an in-home visit if that visit allows for it. You can have telemedicine visit where those visits allow for it. And so you just need to communicate with the site about, your comfort level and what you need. and then they'll help coordinate those things. So, you want to come to us, we'll take care of it. You want us to come to you, we'll take care of it. We'll make it as easy as possible. You just have to communicate with the site about those things. And all of the sites also obviously are, adhering to their local guidelines, and they have their own COVID protocols in place to make sure that everyone's got the right protective gear and that there's cleanliness, and, they're adhering to all of the rules as well.
Now, to the personal stuff, what drives you to wake up every day and, do what you do?
I basically want to live forever, or at least 150 years. Life is really, really short, and there's so many things that are out there to experience. And I just want to know about everything, and I want to understand different life experiences on a very sort of deep level. And I guess that's why I'm attracted to do what I do. I'm learning all the time, and I get to interact with patients, and it's insanely stressful. I'm not going to lie. It's insanely stressful because we want to do a good job,
right?
But we know the impact that we might have. It can be very fast paced. But, sometimes when you get something right, when you get that feedback from the field, from caregivers or patients that you've had a positive impact on their life somehow, that's just everything. That's the whole reason we do what we do. That, that's the ultimate sort of feeling of, my job is worth something.
Now, before we wrap this up, I have one more question. All right, one more question. If you could change or improve one thing about clinical research or clinical trials specifically, what would it be?
I would make them more accessible to everyone. I stated before, I think it's important for everyone to participate. I think that's the best way for us to move science forward. So I would just try to make them as accessible as possible. Absolutely.
I love that. Well, I want to thank everyone for listening to another episode of ClinArk Talks. Also, Irena, I want to thank you, for sharing your story, your journey, your perspective. It's much appreciated.